And so I'll just turn it over to Lori. Welcome.
Thanks, Anna, and thank you everybody for joining and signing up to register for this. Uh, so, what I really wanted to do is basically, um, I want to talk about our wines a little bit, but I really want to share Paso Robles with you guys. I don't know how many people have been there, and now all of a sudden, all I can see is myself. So hold on. Okay, all right. So I don't know how many people have been to Paso Robles. Uh, raise hands. All right, so quite a few of our little group here. My husband and I fell in love with Paso Robles the first time we were there. Um, we met at work. So at Whittier, I was doing actually at Whittier, I was doing marine biology and biology, and that didn't go where I was going. So when I graduated, I did microbiology. And so I worked as a microbiologist in New Jersey, and my husband is a food chemist. So we went, I like to tell him that he made the products, but it was really my job was much more important because he would create the product and then he would bring it to me, and I would have to make sure that it was safe for people to eat. So, like, he just made the products, but I made sure nobody died. So it was really much more important. So we started, and we were kind of, oh, I think I'm muted now. It says I'm muted by post.
No,
Unmute. Okay.
no.
All right. Am I back? Okay. So now it says I'm muted again. Okay. All right. So when we started dating, we were kind of low on the totem pole of, our jobs, and we couldn't afford to go out anywhere. So we would basically go and walk to the local wine shop and food store, and we would purchase wine by clearly the label. Like, had no clue what we were doing. We were just buying wine by the label, and we would sit down, and my husband's name is Michael. He would cook dinner because I don't cook, and he would, we'd sit down and have dinner over the wine and drink and all that. And as we progressed in our careers, we were able to, as I say, kind of unbend from the bottom shelf wines and move up so we can stand up straight and see the wines up at the top shelf. And we started to realize that there was a difference from one wine to another wine and the quality of that wine. From there, we then started going to California to travel to Napa and Sonoma because that's where you go. And we started realizing again that there's a lot more out there than than just what's on the shelves. So we realized the quality was different. And then we decided, you know what? We're science dorks. We can do this. We like wine. Let's make wine. So we got into this thing called Make Wine With Us. And what that is a whole group of people get together, and we purchased fruit from Lodi, California. And that fruit got trucked on a refrigerated truck back to New Jersey. And it's a huge party, basically. So everybody who's in this group, right, they're all making their own barrel of wine, and they're all there, and they're kind of just throwing everything in and drinking and drinking. And Michael and I are pulling out Mog. Now, Mog first cork dork. Mog is material other than grapes. And so we would pull that out, and we would pull the moldy grapes out, and we pulled all the stuff you don't want in your wine out. And at the end of the year, you have a massive party, and everybody gets to taste everybody's wine. And everybody there was like, well, why is your wine better than our wine? Like, it significantly tastes different, but it was all from the same thing. And we were saying, well, that's because we didn't throw all that stuff in there. So then they were like, oh, you could do this. And then that little voice goes in your head. And so that's kind of how we got started. And then we realized that trucking grapes from California to New Jersey really is not the way to go. So then we contracted with, in San Francisco, there was a place called Crush Pad, and Crush Pad is a custom crush facility. And we got fruit from White Hawk Vineyard down in Santa Barbara. And White Hawk Vineyard is like a world-renowned, vineyard. Like, if you're into wine, White Hawk. And that wine really did come out really well. And again, like, we couldn't sell it, but we would give it away, and everybody would be like, oh, you're pretty good at this. You should do this. You should do this. And again, the little voice gets a little bigger. So we decided, all right, this is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to retire to. So one day in 2013, we were sitting at the dinner table, and we're like, you know what? This is the year we're going to do this. We're going to start this. So we're going to decide where we're going to do this. Now, from Whittier, I fell in love with Southern California, but Michael only knew Northern California, so that's what he wanted. So we were like, all right, I'm not living in Northern California. He was like, I'm not living in Southern California. So we're like, oh, here's this thing, this Central Coast thingamajiggy. Let's go look at that, So we flew into the Central Coast and had no clue what to expect. We fell in love with it on day one. And then we were like, oh my gosh, there's wine here. So then we started tasting wine from the Paso area, and we're like, this is really good stuff. And we settled that was where we are going to be. So we actually purchased property that's still sitting there waiting for us to build our house on. And then in 2013, we knew we're going to start our winery. So that was pretty much it. We were like one dinner down, and we're like, we're doing this. We started connecting with people, winemakers in Paso, and we found fruit, and we just started the winery. And we knew that we wanted Draco. So the label, I sent everybody labels so you can see them. So this guy here is actually Draco, and he was named after the constellation of all of the dragon souls, which is really, really obvious now in the sky. It's right by the Big Dipper. So all of the dragon souls, and that's how he got his name. But when we had him for 14 years, and when he passed, I did not do well. So my husband got me a Draco tree that we put in his little place. And that's what you see on the outside of the label. This is a Draco tree. And since we're both science dorks, we were like, all right, well, let's also come up with something scientific for the name. So Dracaena is actually the genus name for a Draco tree. So that's where the name came from. And Draco was actually hand drawn by another Whittier alum, Sonia Wee, who's now Sonia Gerard. She graduated in '92.
Banning people.
And I took pictures of him, like old school film pictures of him, and sent it to her, and she drew that and put him in a vineyard, and we have that picture in our house. And without the vineyard, that's the label. So that's where the name came from. We love the name. It's not so easy to say. People ended up basically just saying, you're the dog wine. We're like, okay, we'll live with that. But what I think is really funny is during especially the last season of Game of Thrones, we became the Dracarys wine, because the mother of dragons would say Dracarys, and the dragons would go on, spook the fire. So people couldn't say Dracaena, but they could say Dracarys. So we also are known as the Dracarys wines. So that is how we got into it, and how we found Paso. So I actually think the history of Paso is pretty cool. It was founded by 3 different people. James and Daniel Blackburn brothers came there for the gold rush, and they kicked butt, finding gold. They were like finding gold hand over fist, and they became, I guess, what would be equivalent to millionaires. And then the third person, who really is the character of Paso, was Drury James, and he was the uncle of Jesse James. So Paso and Jesse James has a lot to go with each other. what happened, or as the story says, is that Jesse James came to Paso and to hide out while he was being hunted, by the law. And there's a couple of places in Paso that are supposedly where he was. So Thomas Hill Organics used to be the stable, and I don't really get why it's so important where Jesse James kept his horse, but it's a big deal in Paso. So Jesse James kept his horse at Thomas Hill Organics. And one of the main huge wineries for Paso is Tobin James. And Tobin James, if you go has anybody been to Tobin James? Okay, so no, all right. If you have been to Tobin James, you know what type of winery that is. I mean, you go in and you're stumbling out because they have no concern about how much wine they're pouring. They have a good time at Tobin James, and it's pretty much all Zinfandel, so it's big Paso Zin, so high alcohol, and they just pour and pour and pour. And it's a fun place to go, so I recommend going there. But if you go to Tobin James, they have a huge bar in the back, and they went through a lot of lengths to get that bar. And there's supposedly gunshot holes in that bar, and those gunshot holes are supposedly from Jesse James. So that's kind of a little bit cool info about Paso. Um, what makes Paso so special is before everybody came on, we were talking about the temperatures and everything. So today in Paso, it was like 102, 103. When you're a vine, just like actually you, right? At 103, you don't want to do anything. You want to just kind of kick back and relax. Same thing with the vine. When the temperature hits over 100 degrees, vines just want to shut down. They don't want to do anything, which isn't good if we're trying to, get those grape sugars up to a point where we can harvest. But what makes Paso so cool is that almost by the clock, 3 to 3:30, the winds start coming in and the temperature drops significantly. And that change from high temperature to low temperature is what's called diurnal shift. And that is what makes Paso so incredible. So we can have the high temperatures, and then at night the grapes can relax and then go through their maturation, and we can get the sugars to where we want. And what that does is allow those grapes to hang on to the vine long enough to get to the sugar levels that we want them to. In areas that it's too cold or areas that it's too hot, you don't really get to that point, and the flavors you taste in the wine are going to show that. It's not going to be as developed. It's not going to be so dynamic on your palate. We have rolling hills on the east side, and the Santa Lucia coastal range is on the west side. And we have the San Andreas Fault, which is like 30 miles to the east of us. So all of that comes into play in terms of how our fruit develops. And what else about Paso? Oh, the Mid-County Fair, okay, right? Or Mid-State Fair. Anybody been to the Mid-State Fair? It's massive. No? Okay, so the first time we've had the fair was in 1934. And sadly, this is the first year since 1934 that we're not having the fair. So it went from 1 day to like 4 days. And that's actually where Ronald Reagan came riding in on his horse, and he announced that he was going to become, or he was going to run for governorship. So that's actually where Ronald Reagan started his political career. And the Mid-State Fair is huge. I mean, we have major bands come in, and on top of, the horse competition and cow competition and pigs and all of that stuff. So it's a fantastic time to be in Paso, just not this year. And so that's kind of what makes Paso Paso. What else? Does anybody have any questions? I'm like talking and talking and talking. Any questions? No? All right, okay. So where most regions, like if you think Bordeaux, there's the left bank and the right bank. Okay, so most wine regions have some sort of geographical entity that separates the regions, right? So Bordeaux has the Grande River, right? So left bank, right bank. You have Cabernet dominant versus Merlot dominant. Well, Paso has a division, but our division is a freeway. So our division is 46. So 46 east, 46 west. So Paso is east side Paso, west side Paso. And although it's weird that it's a freeway that does that, there's really a big difference between the two. And so the three things that make the difference between the east side and the west side is the soil, the temperature or the topography, and the rainfall. So there's big differences, even though they're like 5 miles apart from each other and it's a freeway. So very typically, east is hotter than west. So you're going to have Rhone varietals on the west or Bordeaux varietals on the east. Not always, but that's the general thing. Okay? And so Tablas Creek is in the Adelaide district. We have 11 AVAs. Tablas Creek is probably the most well-known winery that's in our region. And they're on the west side, but they're also south. So they get a whole major difference, so much colder than what the east side gets. Whereas if you're on the west side, but you're north, it's still colder than the majority of the east, but not as cold as the south. So we have variation north to south as well as east to west. You have really, Lori? Tobin James is Whittier? I did not know that. I did not know that. Well, we'll have to talk later. We'll have to talk about that.
I've actually been there with some friends of mine, so that's part of the deal. That's when I found out. I was in that bar on our way to a bike ride and talking with them, and they're from Whittier. So I'll fill in later on that.
It's because Whittier is the center of the universe.
I think so. I agree with that. Whittier is the center of the universe. Yeah. I always say, I'm like, we're basically known for the two things that people either, when I say Whittier, they either go, oh, Nixon went there, or weren't you in an earthquake? Those are like the two things. those are the two main things that they know about. So yeah, I'd love to hear that because I had never heard that before. The west side is closer to the coast, so that's why it's basically cooler. And you can have the rainfall. Really, we have the rainfall can be a difference between like 25 inches a year between the east side and west side. So that's really a huge difference. The west side has more hills, where the east side is kind of more roly-poly type thing. Also, the soils are different. So the west side is very high in calcium and very little topsoil. So the vines, so people always say a stressed vine is a good vine. There's that gray area. Stress is good, but overstress is like death of a vine. But in the west side, because there's these the calcium deposits and the rocks, right? The vine roots have to go down, and they have a little easier time than on the west side. So the west side can dry farm because of the additional rainfall, and because of how the soils are. Where the east side, we irrigate. I'm on the east side, so we irrigate on the east side. So I think it's time to drink. Who's with me? Everybody's ready to drink? All right. So we're going to start off with the rosé because 108 degrees is good rosé time. So the rosé actually comes from the Pomar district in Paso, and it is the east side of Paso, but it's really a unique thing in the fact that because of its situation, the Templeton Gap, those winds actually come in to the Pomar district. So it is colder than 90% of the west side AVAs. So it's a cool little pocket. It's, you know, it's got its own little identity. Syrah likes cool weather. So Syrah isn't found on a lot of the east side, but because this district, the Pomar district, is cooler, gets that Templeton Gap, it can grow there. We love Syrah, so we wanted to make our rosé of Syrah. It's not a common rosé. Typically you see Pinot Noir as a rosé. So this is going to be, if you're into those Pinot rosés, this is a big wine. Okay? This is a much bigger wine than we're going to sit back and pound on it. I think you can sit back and pound on it, but it's a fuller body. So there's two ways that you can make a rosé. Does anybody know? See the teacher me. Does anybody know the two ways to make a rosé? No? Okay. So the first way is called Saignee, S-A-I-G-N-E-E, and it means bleed. So the way it works is, if I was making a Saignee, I'm going to pick my red grape for my red wine. So if I was making this as a Saignee, I would pick this Syrah later in the season because I'm picking it to be a red grape variety. And I want my Syrah to be bigger and bolder. So I'm going to bleed off some of that juice. And when I bleed off some of that juice, that's where I'm going to get this color from, because when you drink wine, the color comes from the skins. Okay? So as I bleed off that wine, the juice, it becomes a little bit of a color. Then I take that rosé, and that's my one wine. But then I take my Syrah, and because there's less juice on more skins, my Syrah is a bigger wine. It's a bolder wine. It's going to be darker. It's going to have more tannin, that's like sandpapery stuff on the side of your tongue. Okay? It's going to be a bigger wine. And so a Saignee method gives me two wines off of one grape. We don't do it that way. So we do a direct press. So this was picked early. In fact, our 2020 Syrah, if we were making a Syrah, would not be picked until late October. We're picking our Syrah for our rosé in 2 weeks. So the end of August, you know, we don't have an exact day, but the sugar is where we're getting. Okay, so in about 2 weeks. So we're going to be picking early September, late August for this wine. And what that does is the acid, as sugar levels go up, the acids go down. So we pick this with high acid so that it's that crisp, acidic taste that people like in a rosé. So when you taste it, you're going to get that acid. And what we hope is that, you know, the acid is always that thing that makes you want to come back for another sip, that it makes your tongue start to salivate. So we make it direct press. So it's one wine, one grape. After we take out all of that juice, what's left of those grapes, actually we bring them right back to the vineyard and dump them right back so that it goes back to Mother Nature. Okay? So Saignee, 2 wines, 1 grape, direct press, 1 wine, 1 grape. So plancha, so cheers. Now, rosé you typically drink at a colder temperature. If we did our job for your palate, right now your tongue is kind of a little salivating right there. Okay. That's what we want in a rosé. The body is a big body. So what we like about this rosé and why we choose Syrah is because we want you to enjoy it, but those lighter rosés can't stand up to a meal. This wine, we feel, you can sit on your back porch in the 108 degrees and drink it by itself, or you can have it with a meal. And one of my favorite dishes to pair with this is, like, vegetarian wise, is like a penne arrabbiata or chicken, Cajun chicken. So just a bit of heat, nothing like those peppers are not like making you sweat, like not that hot, but just a little bit of kick to it. And this rosé is going to cleanse your palate. You're going to have that bite of heat, and then this rosé is going to cleanse your palate and make you want to have another bite and then another sip. And that's really, when you're doing a wine pairing, that's really what you want is, you know, you want the combination to make both of those things better. So this district, AVA, we have a diurnal shift of between 20 and 35 degrees. So change from night to day is 35 degrees. And we only get about an average of 15 inches a year of rainfall. And the elevation is only like 1,500, like 700 to 1,500 high. So we're not very high on this. So what do you guys think? We like? Yeah? Awesome, awesome. All right. We're gonna go, what I wanna do is to go through and tell you guys how to do a tasting. We want to, like, notes on it, you know, you read those notes of, you know, taste like brambleberry and orange and blah, 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 okay? First of all, I'm not gonna lie, it's BS, okay? It's complete BS, and I write them. I mean, if you look at if you go on our website and you look at the text sheets, it is, you know, it is creative writing at its best, okay? What I taste is very different than what you taste, okay? But wineries have to have tasting notes. So rule number one of wine tasting is do not ever let somebody tell you what you're tasting, okay? That's rule number one. Rule number two is do not let anybody tell you that that's a bad wine. Because if you like it, it's a good wine. Whether you are drinking 2 Buck Chuck, right, or you are drinking Screaming Eagle, okay, it doesn't matter. What you like is what you like. And quite honestly, I would be thrilled if I enjoyed 2 Buck Chuck, because I could get a lot of wine for $2 a bottle, right? So if you like it, that's awesome, okay? So in my little bio, I in addition to the winery and in addition to my full-time job, I write a weekly blog and I do a weekly podcast. And that's where Exploring the Wine Glass comes from. That's the name of the blog and the podcast. And what I say, I have 2 little sayings. The first thing is, I will never tell you what to drink, but I'll always share what's in my glass. I'm always happy to share what's in, you know, what I'm pouring. And the second thing is, I am a bit of a saber freak. Has anybody sabered? Yay! Isn't it fun? It's a blast. Okay. Do people know what I'm talking about when I say saber? No. Okay. So sparkling wine has carbon dioxide in it. So all those bubbles, right? That's what we all love. So when you have a sparkling wine, champagne or sparkling, please don't do a frizzante. Anybody who's drinking a frizzante, don't do it because they'll just explode. But when you have a sparkling wine, right, there's a seam on the glass. Oh, well, actually sparkling is the only ones that do, okay? So there's a seam on the glass, and where the seam and the top, the lip of the glass come together is the weakest part of the bottle. So you can very easily saber the top of the bottle off. Give me 1 second. Show you. So, you can saber off the top of the bottle. Okay, so this, here's the champagne cork, here's the neck of the bottle, okay, and you can saber it off. And you can use anything. I mean, there's real sabers out there, like Michael bought me a saber, so it's a knife, and it all came from Napoleon. Napoleon sabered, right? He was like, oh, party, you know, and he sabered it. But, so that's where it came from. It's super simple to do. People are very scared of it, but it's super simple to do. All you need to do is make sure that the neck is super cold. That's the rule, right? But you can saber with anything. So I have sabered with a glass, my saber. I've sabered with spoons. I sabered with a stapler. Pretty much anything in my house is fair game for me to saber with. So it's a blast. It's a blast. But to get back, squirrel, to get back, you want to drink wine at its proper temperature, okay? So when you're drinking wine, most people drink wine way too cold, and you're losing so much of what that wine wants to show you, okay? So when you're drinking champagne or a sparkling, you want to be drinking it at like 42 to 50 degrees, okay? And that's kind of the same for a light-bodied red. So a light-bodied red would be like a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. Okay? You want them to be cold. The rosé, you want this to be at like 45 to 55. If it's colder than that, you're not going to be able to get the aromas out of the wine. And on your palate, it's going to be duller, right? It's cold, so it's going to dull your palate, okay? When you move on to fuller-bodied white wines or light-bodied red wines, you want them to be about 50 to 55. So that's like a Napa Chardonnay, right? A Rombauer, a Butterbomb Chardonnay, okay? That you want to be in that like 50 to 55, 59, okay? Or a Beaujolais, new, right? You want that. And then as you go to a medium red, you want it to be like 55 to 62. And then a full bodied, you want to be at like 58 to 65. So when they say serve at room temperature, it's not real room temperature. It's room temperature when they lived in castles. Okay? So a little different. Like my room temperature right now is 80. Right? So you don't want to be drinking at 80. Ooh, okay? Too warm. Okay? Again, I will never tell you what to drink, okay, or how to drink, but people who say they don't like red wine, but then put ice cubes in the red wine, okay, you're making the red wine worse. And because when red wine gets too cold, the tannins come out stronger. So the tannins are those things that are sandpaper on your tongue. Tannins are the things that dry out your tongue. Tannins are the thing that gives you, well, I won't go there. Tannins are the things that make you want to drink more water, okay? So that's typically what people don't like about red wine. So when you put the ice cube in it or you serve it too cold, you're making it more harsh for you, okay? So this is fine to drink colder, but when we get to the reds, you want to drink them a little bit warmer, right? You want what room temperature would be if you lived in the castle. So like 62, 65 degrees, okay? All right, we're gonna go to this next. I'm gonna finish my rosé. Okay, and we're gonna go through the tasting grid to teach you guys how to do tasting notes. So this is my Reserve Cabernet Franc, and as you can see, the label is the same, Just what changes is the tree color. Okay, so that's how you tell the difference of our wines. Okay. So when you go through a tasting panel, it is super simple. And I'm going to give you guys an app to make it even easier. Right there. WSET. I'll go back and do it again. It is called WSET. So I just have a few wine apps. Right there in the middle. Okay. So WSET is Wine Spirits Education Trust. And you can sign up for classes that teach you about wine. So I am a level 2 graduate. So it's a class, it was 8 weeks long, plus then the 9th week was a test that you have to pass. And it teaches you different regions of wine and teaches you how to taste wine. And it sounds really, really, really confusing, but it's really easy. It's a simple grid. So 3 things we pay attention to. What does it look like? What does it smell like? And what does it taste like? Okay? So first, here's our reserve. When it is a red, you have 3 choices. I'm sorry, 4. You have ruby, garnet, purple, or tawny. If it's tawny, it's an old wine. That's like a brick color, okay? Ruby is kind of like, you know, ruby shoes, you know, like Dorothy, okay? Garnet is kind of in between red and purple, and then purple. You want to talk about the depth of that color, so it's either light, medium, or deep color. So the way we do this is you actually take your wine glass, you hold it up, and you put your 2 fingers behind the glass. So I'm actually behind, so it's your eye, the glass, and then your fingers. Can you see your fingers behind my wine? No. So it's deep or dark, okay? So then you look at the color. It's either ruby. Does it look like Dorothy's shoes? No, right? Garnet is in between, and then purple. So there's a lot of, you know, some people call purple garnet, some people call garnet purple. So there's really not that big of a difference. This, to me, is purple. Okay, so this is deep purple in color. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is the nose. So you do the little swirl, and why you swirl the wine is because it puts oxygen in there, and oxygen is going to release the aromas. Okay, so you swirl and you shove your nose in the glass. Okay, now true tasters actually do both nostrils at a time. Like, I'll smell in this nostril, and then I'll smell in this nostril. I have a deviated septum, so nothing's going through this side. So I just do it all together. Okay. So now you're going to smell it. You want intensity of those aromas. So there's light intensity, medium, and pronounced. Light intensity would be, I have to stick my nose in it and really, really, really smell. Take an inhale to get any nose whatsoever. Pronounced would be, I can bring it up to my nose and I can already start to smell something. And a medium is medium. Again, what you think is pronounced is different than what I think is pronounced. So don't let anybody tell you differently, okay? So as I bring it up, I can start to smell aromas. I don't have to do this to get an aroma. Right? I bring it up to my nose and I can start to smell something. So it is a pronounced, to me, a pronounced aroma. Okay? Then we go into what do you smell? At its basic level, you can say red fruit or dark fruit. That's the basic level, right? Do you smell fruit that's a red? So is it a strawberry? Is it a cranberry? Is it a raspberry? Or is it a dark fruit? Is it a plum? Is it blackberry? Is it black cherry? Okay. So up to you what you smell. If you're talking to somebody who is into wine, they're going to talk about primary, secondary, and tertiary. Don't be scared off. It's super simple, okay? Primary is the fruit. That's it. Secondary is what me as the winemaker does to it. So I'm going to go back, not that there's anything wrong with it, but I'm going to go back to that big buttery Rombauer Chardonnay, okay? A lot of that is winemaker manipulation, what the winemaker does. That would be secondary. So vanilla flavors would be, or aromas would be from the barrel, okay? So that would be secondary. Things that come from the barrel, things that come from what I'm doing to it as the winemaker is secondary. And then tertiary is as it ages, it kind of evolves. So you're going to start to get leather, earth, those types of aromas. That's tertiary. Okay. When I do tasting notes, I don't deal with primary, secondary, and tertiary. If I smell earth, I just say earth. If I smell, if I smell wet leaves, I say wet leaves. So I just want to tell you about them, but I wouldn't be so concerned about them. So for me, this is pronounced. My bottle has been open for 2 days. So I'm getting earth, I'm getting leather, I'm getting black cherry, and I'm getting black licorice. Those are the main things that I'm getting. You may get that, you may not get that. It doesn't matter because your brain functions differently, right? So what I smell as black cherry is not what you smell as black cherry. It's the same thing. What I see as orange is not the same orange you see, okay? And then the fun part, you get to taste. So after you smell it, you taste it. Now, that looks funny as all hell. It smells good. That's all that matters. When people taste, you see them slurping it around and doing that type of stuff. It may look funny and it sounds funny, but there's a reason for doing that. Same reason why we swirl the wine glass to get the aromas. When you're slurshing it around your tongue, it's putting oxygen into it, and it's getting your whole palate to be involved in it. So you do want to slurp it. You do want to kind of swish it all over the place. Okay. When you're tasting, the first thing you want to do is talk about its sweetness level. So is it dry, off dry, sweet? Okay. Lots of people, especially with Paso, with the heat, those big jammy Zinfandels, people will say that it's sweet, and it's not sweet. So here's the trick. If you taste a wine and you think it's sweet, pinch your nose, taste it again. If it still tastes sweet, it's a sweet wine. If it's not a sweet wine, if it's the fruit, that jamminess of that's a lot of Paso, if you taste it when you're holding your nose, it's no longer going to taste sweet. So that's the trick to sweetness. Okay. So is it dry? This is dry. We ferment this till all of the yeasties are dead. Okay. They've eaten everything that's in there. They've eaten all that out, the sugars that are in there, and they've all lived a happy life and have moved on. Okay. After sweetness, okay, is acidity. Light acidity, medium acidity, high acidity. So when you taste it, what's going on your tongue, like we talked about with the rosé. After that is the tannin. So that's that drying amount that you're going to get on the sides of your tongue and actually on your gums. Okay. So if you swish it around and your gums start to dry up, that's going to be a high tannin. Okay. And then alcohol. So Paso is known for the alcohol, right? Those Zinfandels, those Tobin James Zinfandels are like 15.5. And by the way, it's not really a lie, but legally you're allowed 1%. Okay, so that 15.5 Tobin James Zin could be 16.5 and still be legal. Okay, so little concern about, or pay attention to those labels. That's because by the time they have to give us time to print the labels versus when we actually bottle. So you're allowed 1%. Once you're over 14%, you're allowed 1% leeway. And 14% means the taxes that we pay are higher. So once we hit 14, it's fair game, basically. So this wine we claim is 14.4. So that means legally it can be 13.4 to 15.4 by law. Okay, so just keep that in mind when you're drinking wine. After the alcohol is the body. So what does the body taste like? So this is how I determine the body. If it's like non-fat milk, it's light-bodied. If it's like 2% milk on your tongue, it's medium-bodied. And if it's like whole milk on your tongue, it's full-bodied. Okay? And then the intensity, light, medium, pronounced, and then what flavors you get, and then your finish. Is it disappear quickly? Does it linger for a couple of seconds? Or does it linger for like 30 plus seconds? So short, medium, or long finish. So with this, right, for me, it's dry. It's pretty high acidity. The tannins are medium. The alcohol is medium. The body is full. The intensity is pronounced. And then I'm getting more of the black fruits, those black cherries, the black plum, those types of things. And then the finish is medium plus. So not quite long, but medium plus. So this guy is our reserve. And the reason why it's the reserve is because it says Plummer Vineyard. Okay. So I'm claiming that this is 100% from Plummer Vineyard, okay? And that's legal. I cannot claim this unless it's true, okay? Where reserve, right, we're calling it a reserve, that has no legal definition. I can call anything I want a reserve. Same thing with old vines, like everybody's all hot and heavy over old vines in. Old vine, it can be 10 days old and I can call it old vine, okay? So reserve is no legal definition, but the fact that we're calling it Plummer Vineyard is legal definition. It has to be 100% from Plummer Vineyard, okay? And the reason why we call this a reserve is because it's a single clone. So this is Mother Nature in a glass. It's a single clone, single vineyard, 100% Cabernet Franc. It's going to change from vintage to vintage, okay? So what do you guys, it also, this has 30% new French oak, where the next one we're going to taste has 20, or that has 40% and the next one has 30%. So does anybody have questions on tasting or?
There was a question, Lori, from Angie. Is the slushing done just with the reds or all wines?
You can do it with all wines. If you're going to be tasting to do a note, you slurp it all around, whether it's a rosé, whether it's a white or a red. Okay. If you're just drinking it, just drink, you know. But if you want to do notes on it, then yeah, you do it with anything. Okay. And that, I don't know if that's kind of a little sidebar, but decanting, okay. Decanting, there's a lot of false thoughts about decanting. You can decant a white. Okay, there's whites out there that you definitely want to decant, but you also can ruin a wine by decanting. So you have to kind of know how long you want it to be in that glass. And the reason why we decant is to aerate something. So like I had a 98 Bordeaux. That baby has so much sediment in it that you decant it to not get the sediment in it, and it's been in a basically anaerobic condition since 1990, well, since 1998, 2000. Okay, so you want to give it some air, but you can over aerate. Okay, so you can harm a wine. A little bit of oxygen, good. A lot of oxygen, no good. Okay, so all right, aerators. So aerators are the ADD version of decanters. Okay, so I open a bottle, I can't wait, so I'm going to aerate. Okay, that's basically what it is. It is harsher than actually pouring into a decanter and letting it aerate over a long period of time. So it is harsher. So you run the risk of losing some of those flavors that and aromatics that you would have gotten if you just let it sit a while. But they're functional. They do the job. They're putting massive oxygen in a quick thing. My recommendation is if you really can't wait, my recommendation is to open the bottle, aerate the one glass you're going to drink at that moment, and then put the rest into a decanter and let it aerate, on its own time frame. And you don't need to spend, like, there's decanters that are like $1,000 out. Like, that's insane. Like, any glass you have, a pitcher, like a water pitcher, is a decanter. You do not need to spend money on a decanter. I mean, they're pretty and they're kind of cool, but anything that's open is going to act as a decanter. So, spend your money where you want it. Same thing with glasses. People have glasses for, everything there is. Yes, it's nice. And yes, there's different glasses for different things, but you don't need to waste your money on that. Like, I would much prefer to spend my money on another, on a wine than on the glass. The big thing you want to pay attention to in the glass is the thickness here, okay? The thicker this rim is, the more difficult it is for you to taste the wine the way the winery wants you to taste it. Okay, so you want a thin glass. Crystal actually is the best, but a lot of people don't buy crystal because it breaks easily. But if you want to drink a red wine, typically like this bulbs out, okay, and then narrows in here. So the reason why it does that is to get the oxygen into this area, but then when I bring it up to my mouth, my nose comes in and I can get the aromas as I'm tasting. Okay, so you want to look for something that's got a little bulb here. If you're drinking champagne, I know flutes are like the thing to do, okay, but flutes are not the best for sparkling wines or champagne. This is actually better for champagne, but then you don't get all the bubbles on your nose. So if you like the tickling on the bubbles on your nose, go with a flute. But if you really want to taste the champagne, then you want to do that. You want a bigger thing, or a coupe, which is like the 20s, those things. So that's that. All right. Our last wine.
Oh, we have a few more questions on the chat regarding that. Let's see.
We've heard that smelling wine can be done in different places of the glass to smell different aromas. I don't know about different places on the glass, but the different shapes of the glass can allow you to smell different things. If it's a narrower glass, you're going to smell something differently than if it's a wider glass. And the glass does play an impact on bubbles for sparkling. That's another reason why there's flutes, lots and lots of bubbles. Whereas if you have a glass like this, you're going to see less bubbles, so it's not as playful. I have never heard different places on the glass. I do, like I had said earlier, you can do one nostril than the other. I don't know. I've never heard that. Doesn't mean I'm right. I mean, it could be true. I've just never heard that. What is the ideal time frame for decanting? That is the $1 million question, right? That you don't know. We recommend, like if you just opened our bottle, we recommend at least an hour to decant. If you're drinking the 2017, that's kind of when it gets into it. But it matters how big the mouth is, how big the bowl is, and it depends on that individual wine. So the best, my recommendation, just keep sipping till you get to the point you think it's the best. Okay. It's, you know, typically we decant when we start cooking, you know, prepping cooking, and that way it's ready for when we're ready to sit down. But like I said, you can over decant, especially some of the white wine. You can over decant. There is no perfect formula for that. Should we hold the glass by the stem? Yes. Yes. So I am not a fan of stemless glassware. So when I was giving you the temperatures of what to drink at, you always want to, if you're going to err, you want to err on the side of cold, because if the wine is too cold and you're not getting what you want out of it, you can always just do this and warm up the wine. But once the wine is too warm, you can't do that anymore. Okay? So always err on the side of being too cold. When you hold a glass of wine, your body temp, right? So if this is supposed to be at 65, 98.6, I'm changing that temperature dramatically, okay, by holding it like this. So yes, you want to hold it by the stem. That's why the stems are there. The stemless glassware came out because it's tougher to knock over. That's really why. If you're going to drink out of a stemless, I recommend this. So like your wine is down here, hold it up here. Because again, if you're holding it down here, you're going to warm up that wine. So hold it here. Okay? But again, if you like the wine warmer, then go ahead. That's good. But yeah, I recommend stemless. I'm not a fan. I'm sorry, I recommend stemmed. I'm not a fan of the stemless. I like thin glass. Yes, thin glass. Yes, leaded crystal is fantastic. Well, I think that goes to the leaded is because, you know, like lead paint and stuff. So I think there probably is that. And I do know that like bourbon, when you open the bottle of bourbon and you put it in the leaded crystal, I know there had been issues with that. So I think it has more to do with the storage in the lead crystal than if I'm just pouring it in and drinking it that night. I think it has more to do with the storage. But yeah, I think now you can get crystal that doesn't have lead in it. I would probably vote for the non-leaded version. And then I heard you can tell an old world wine versus a new world by putting on your upper. Yeah, so that's the tannin. Yeah. Blind tasting old world versus new world, snap. Yeah, so that's the tannin. Old world wines, they're big in the tannin. That's why I'm drinking a 98 last week, right? You're holding them for a long time. That the tannins in there, that comes up on your gums. So when you're swishing it around, when your gums get all sandpapery, that's a sign that it's an old world wine. So yes. Oh, but the old world, now that I've never heard. The metals due to World War I and World War II. I've never heard that. It's always been tannins. I don't know. I can't say no to that. I've just never heard of that. So, sorry. I'll have to look it up. Maybe that'll be a blog post in the future. All right. So our last wine is what we call our classic. This is the wine that actually started it all. We started in 2013 with about 70-ish cases of this, and we now have just under 400. And actually with this vintage, we are bringing in a white wine to our portfolio. We're bringing in a Chenin Blanc. So we'll be over 400 cases. So this wine, and the reason why I taste this last is because this wine, although it says Cabernet Franc on it, so that's another legal term. In order to be Cabernet Franc, it needs to be 75%. So whenever you see a wine that has a name on it, it has to be at least 75% of that grape varietal, but it can be 25% anything else. So this wine is 95% Cabernet Franc, 5% Petite Syrah. So Petite Syrah is a little itty bitty grape, like this big, and the color is super, super, super purple, okay? And it's a deep wine, so it's a bigger tannin, okay? So this wine, if you have two glasses, if you look at this wine versus the reserve wine in two different glasses, this is a much deeper color wine. And that's the 5% Petite Syrah makes that difference, okay? And this is going to have a much bigger palate to it, a bigger tannin, so you're going to get that gum stuff on it. And it has less new French oak, so those tannins are not going to be as big and bold in your face of the reserve, where this, it's going to be big and bold in your face. This baby, you want food with, okay? You want food with. And I recommend butternut squash with like rosemary, okay? Butternut squash soup with rosemary, or actually if you want decadent, chocolate lava cake goes really, really good with it, okay? Because chocolate lava cake is not sweet, right? It's that like, it's a different type of chocolate. It's baking chocolate, okay? You don't want sweet with this, so that lava just kicks butt with it. So, and if you just want cheese, Gouda cheese is, aged Gouda is fantastic with this. So this is our classic. You would go through the same exact profile that you did with the WSET. And I think that when you taste this, I get more acidity on this. Oh, thank you. I get more acidity on this, but the tannin is much more structured. Okay, it's a bigger wine. And it's funny because people, oh, Costco chocolate truffles. Okay, all right. People are split 50-50. Like when we go to an event pre-COVID, when we would go to an event and people would, we pour the reserve, we pour the classic. It was almost like 50-50. Some people like the reserve better. Some people like the classic better. So but they are two completely different wines. And with this vintage, the vintage that we'll be releasing in October, so our 2018 vintage, it is really different because it's going to be 90% Cab Franc, 5% Cabernet Sauvignon, 3% Merlot, and 2% Petite Verdot. So we get to have fun making this wine, where this is Mother Nature in a glass, right, in the bottle. We just take it and we bottle it basically. This, we have blending trials with, we bring in other wines. This is the mad scientist at work here. It's still Cabernet Franc, but that's where we get our mad scientist. Lynn, yes, we do tastings in Paso. We actually do tastings in Paso and Fresno. So wherever you are, you can sign up. We do not charge for our tastings. We feel the wine speaks for itself. We don't want to charge you for it. We taste actually in the vineyard, so you get to see where the fruit comes from. And we walk around, and right now it's beautiful because everything is going through veraison right now. So that's the turning to purple. So it is an amazing time to be in the vineyard. And we do offer a wine club. and I sent paperwork with all of the orders for the wine club. So that drawing that's on that picture, that is Vegas, who is sound asleep over here. He's our winery now. Yes, purple like a poet. Yep. He's the spokesdog for the wine club. So our wine club is called the Chalk Club because in Vegas, if you bet chalk, it means you're betting on the favorites. So we are hoping that once you taste our wines, it becomes one of your favorites. And if you read through what the benefits are, we're very different. What I think are than other wine clubs. First off, we don't ask for a case a year because I personally think that's insane. No matter how much I love a wine, a case of that one winery is a lot of wine. So we are only 6 bottles a year, so 3 bottles twice a year. And then because it's gambling, you get a progressive discount, which I don't know any other winery that does that. So your first year with us is 15%, second year is 20, third year is 25, then 30. We do 15% flat shipping, but if you want to come to Paso, we hand deliver it, or Fresno. And there's some benefits of local restaurants that you can get. And yeah, I always hate when teachers read off of a sheet, so you guys can read what it is. But are there any questions? Anything I missed in the chat? No?
Just the update from John Peel about the
So they went to Broad Oaks.
yeah.
I taught, well, I don't know if you can call it taught. I did work study at Broad Oaks. That and Fridays, which I don't think is there anymore.
No, Fridays. I love Fridays.
Yeah, Fridays.
Let's see, there's a lot of comments, people loving it, what their favorites are tonight.
I
have a question.
Yes.
Do you have plans for any other varietals on?
We do. We, in fact, literally, I know this sounds like so fake, but it's not. Literally this morning, I got my sugar levels for my Chenin Blanc, so a white variety, and that is also from the variety is from the Loire Valley, so that's why we chose it, because it's kind of like partners with Cab Franc. So the sugar levels for our Chenin, which is actually not from Paso, it is from Clarksburg, which is up by Sacramento. The sugar levels are getting close, so harvest is going to be in about eight or 9 days. So that will be released in the spring. So our club has all red or mixed. So if you're in the mixed club, you get Cab Franc in the fall and the Rosé in the spring. Now you would get Rosé and Chenin Blanc in the spring. Okay, so we're excited, and I have to say I'm kind of really excited because Mike is the kind of the lead winemaker for the Cab Francs. I would say we're co with the Rosé because I'm more of a fan of Rosé than Mike is. But so we're kind of co for that. But Chenin Blanc is going to be my baby. I'm doing the whole winemaking
Nice.
of it, So I'll be the lead, and Mike will be the secondary, where it's kind of reversed for the other ones. So.
And have you spent much time in Amador County at all since you went to Davis?
I have not. No.
Oh my goodness.
No, I know.
That's great. Yeah.
I know it's crazy that I haven't. I need to.
Yeah.
That there's so many places that I want to go, and I want to.
Right.
It's the matter of finding time. Full-time job, winery, full-time blog, full-time podcast.
Well, keep making wines like this, and wine will be your full-time job.
Oh, well, thank you. And honestly, if anybody comes to Paso, please schedule an appointment, schedule a tasting on our website. Like I said, it's free. And honestly, if I'm free, I'll show you. I just won't pour our wines. I'll spend the day and share Paso with you. I absolutely love the area, and I want people to love the area as much as we do. So I will be more than happy to show you around. I mean, we've got Gary Eberly, the godfather of Paso. I mean, he played, NFL football. He's amazing. So we have so many awesome people in Paso. So I'll spend the day with you if you want, and show you around and take you around.
No, we're
But,
coming as a poet group. It's our next poet travel group outing.
awesome.